He's a retired law enforcement officer. While serving as a law enforcement cadet, he had a family member that was brutally murdered. And he talks about his own officer-involved shooting and how he uses that as inspiration for writing his best-selling books. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Today radio show. I'm your host. My name's John J. Wiley. In addition to being a radio broadcaster, I'm a retired police sergeant. For the latest news articles and much more, check out our website, letradioshow.com. In the Law Enforcement Today show, we'll be joined by special guests. We'll be talking about their experiences and issues affecting law enforcement officers, first responders, their families, their community, and victims of horrendous crimes. Be sure to like us on Facebook. Our page is Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Check out the daily articles on our website, letradioshow.com. And while you're there, download our free app. One of the questions I get all the time is, how can I show my support for law enforcement? Well, we're all busy. You probably can't go to a protest march. You probably can't go picket somewhere. But there's something very simple you can do with Facebook. When you see a post that you agree with, that you like, share it to your page. It's just that simple. Think of it this way. Facebook has about 2 billion registered users worldwide, so you can make a difference. And one of the best places to find great posts about law enforcement, our Facebook page. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Click like and follow. And when you see posts that you like, you agree with, especially episodes of the radio show and podcast, be sure to share it on your social media. Again, do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Be sure to click like and follow. And then show your support by sharing. Contacting from Southern California, we're retired law enforcement officer and award-winning novelist David Putnam on the phone. David, thanks so much for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Today show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you very much for having me.
And by the way, you've got so many agencies you work for. I don't want to slight them. I'll let you say that because I'll get them wrong. You were in law enforcement for a very, very long time.
Yes. I started off as a sheriff's explorer, then I went to Police Cadet. I was a cadet for 2 years, and then I started at law enforcement as a police officer at 20 for Ontario Police Department. Then I transferred to LA County Sheriff's for 4 years, worked South Central Los Angeles. And I transferred to San Bernardino County Sheriff's, where I did 22 years. At the end of 28 years in Southern California, I retired and went to work as a special agent for the state of Hawaii for the Real Hawaii 5-0.
For the Real Hawaii 5-0, not the Bookham Dano TV type we're used to.
Right. It was the Real Hawaii 5-0.
Yeah, and here's a little bit of trivia for those. I got to admit, I wasn't sure where they got the name from. Hawaii 5-0, the nickname for police. 5-0 came from that series, Hawaii 5-0. And I never knew that until a few years ago. Where have I been all these years?
Yeah. And 5-0 comes from
the 50th state.
The state of Hawaii is the 50th state, right? I would come to work, and the fake Hawaii 5-0 car would be parked in my slot, even.
The fake Hawaii 5-0. I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, and it may change since you were there or before you got there, but there was a time I was looking at going to Hawaii to be a police officer, and I was already working in Baltimore. My sister was a travel nurse, and she said, "Hey, come to Hawaii. The only thing is you got to buy your own police car. You have to provide your own equipment." I'm like, what? Did you ever hear that?
No. There's a, I didn't learn this till I got there. There's a footman, which back in the day, walked a beat, and you promoted up to a motorman, which is driving a car. And a lot of the cars, now the footman drives a marked police car, and a motorman is a promotion to a plane wrap car. And I think that they give you a stipend now for those cars.
They do things differently out there. All I know is this.
Yeah, they definitely.
Everybody tells me it's a wonderful place to live. I had a sister her husband was a signer in the Navy. I had a sister who was there as the traveling nurse, and she said it's a great place to visit, but so expensive. Just the food costs alone would be enough to bankrupt just about anybody. So how people can live on a police officer's budget out there and earnings, I just don't know.
Yeah, you couldn't live along the coast. You have to live inland, where it's less expensive to live. And then you just have to know the places where to go to buy food. And it's not that bad, really.
There we go. Well, so now you're back stateside. And we talked, preparing for the interview, When you were a police cadet, which for a lot of people, they don't understand, that's where you enter into it's almost like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts for law enforcement as a teenager. And there's a certain assignments, but you had a situation when you were a cadet where a family member was murdered. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it kind of started before that. Way back when my mom grew up in Thermal, California, which is the second hottest place in the world next to Death Valley, and she lived in a travel trailer with her two sisters, Virginia and Carol, and all three sisters had different fathers. My Aunt Virginia and my mom turned out okay, but my Aunt Carol went the wrong way. So my mom, I had 5 brothers and sisters, 6 of us, and my mom had to sell toys on a party plan to support us. So she would ship me off in the summertime because she couldn't handle all the kids and the work at the same time. So I'd spend a month out in Redondo Beach with my Aunt Virginia, and then a month in Indio where my Aunt Carol landed. I remember my first memory, my mom put me on a Greyhound bus to go visit Aunt Carol, and I was sitting up front by the driver with a paper grocery bag full of my clothes, and we're driving. I'm 9 years old. And we're driving to Indio, and I remember distinctly because this seagull hit the front of this windshield and splattered all over the windshield, and it startled me. And the driver turned on the windshield wipers and just made a bigger mess of the thing, and it was startling for that age. So my aunt picks me up at the Greyhound station, and this all comes later on. It'll come. They'll understand. And she says, "I'm going to take you kids to the movies." And we stopped and got candy at the store. And I remember it's a chicken O stick. And she dropped us off, bought me our tickets, and we went in and sat down. And I'm sitting there watching, and the movie comes on is In Cold Blood, in black and white. And I'm 9 years old. And my aunt took me to In Cold Blood. So fast forward to I'm a cadet. I was an explorer first, which is the Boy Scout thing like you're talking about. But a cadet is like an intern for the police department. He's like a gopher.
Gotcha.
And he works the front desk, and he fingerprints the sex registrants, the teachers, and the druggies. So what happened was my aunt and my cousin Danny, little Danny, we called him, he was 17 years old, and they were selling tar heroin for the Mexican mafia. And my uncle, he was my favorite uncle, he was just a great guy. He worked for the Metropolitan Water District out there, which was important because it's the Coachella Valley. So he was well known. He found out my aunt was selling tar heroin and said, "You stop it or I'm going to call the cops." And my aunt, I don't know this part about it, but she put a double life insurance policy on him, and then she hired a hitman named Cornelius out of Orange County. And you can Google all this; it's all a matter of public record. And they stiffed in a call to the Metropolitan from saying that there was an emergency at the Metropolitan Water District. My uncle drives out there, gets out to unlock the gate, and they walk up behind him and they assassinate him.
Wow, we're talking with David Putnam. We got so much more to talk about this case and the ramifications with his law enforcement career and how it inspired him to continue his career in law enforcement, his books, and more. This is Law Enforcement Today Show. We're taking a short break. I promise you, we'll be right back. One of the questions I get all the time is, how can I show my support for law enforcement? Well, we're all busy. You probably can't go to a protest march. You probably can't go picket somewhere. But there's something very simple you can do with Facebook. When you see a post that you agree with, that you like, share it to your page. It's just that simple. Think of it this way. Facebook has about 2 billion registered users worldwide, so you can make a difference. And one of the best places to find great posts about law enforcement, our Facebook page. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Click like and follow. And when you see posts that you like, you agree with, especially episodes of the radio show and podcast, be sure to share it on your social media. Again, do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Be sure to click like and follow. And then show your support by sharing. This is the Law Enforcement Today Show. Joining us from California, we have David Putnam, as a guest. David is a retired law enforcement officer, and he is also author of multiple books. His website is davidputnambooks.com. We'll talk about his books later on. Before we end the break, David, you're talking about the murder of your uncle. This was your mother's sister's husband. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And before we get into the story, it's a police cadet. In my agency, we had police cadets, and they served like in the hot desk. They did reports. They did a lot of other things, clerical type work as they aged, and it gave them a head start with the retirement. And then they went to the academy. One of the things is you couldn't have anything that sullied your reputation in our department. So to be in a situation where you're a cadet and you have an aunt, before we get into the details of the murder, you have an aunt that's involved in selling tar heroin, that puts an inordinate amount of pressure on you, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, as a young, what were you, 17?
I think I was 18. Yeah, I just turned 18.
That's still a lot to deal with in law enforcement or anybody. So your aunt was dealing heroin. You're her husband, your uncle. You liked him. She had a double life insurance, and then before we went to the break, you talk about they made a stage call that there's some sort of water emergency, so he showed up or he responded.
Right. And so they killed him, and the police investigated it, but they didn't have any leads because they used a middleman, this hitman Cornelius. So they ended up wiring my cousin's girlfriend. They wired her for sound, and they sent her in for conversation. And they got my cousin to cop out to killing my uncle. So they arrested my aunt Carol and my cousin, and they were pending trial in jail. And through attorneys, my aunt talked my cousin into taking the whole rap, saying that Aunt Carol had nothing to do with it. And she promised that when she got out, she would do everything she could to get him out. And then he did that, and she just walked away. And he got LWOP, which is life without the possibility of parole. He did 48 years before just recently the governor let him out. But anyway, while my aunt's in jail working through this before she's let out, my mom takes Ronald and Julie, my other two niece and nephew, and takes them back home to Ontario. The murder happened in Coachella. And so my mom is watching over her niece and nephew while my aunt is going through investigation. So, my mom was going out to visit, and somehow she got sideways with my aunt and got into an argument. And they pulled the same stunt at my mom's house. This is in Ontario, when I was a cadet in Ontario. They called my mom and pulled her away for some kind of quasi-emergency. And then my aunt had the Mexican mafia kick my mom's door in and kidnap Julie and Ronald from my house in Ontario, the house I grew up in Ontario. So
if someone else told you this story, David, you'd be going, what the heck are you talking about?
I know. It was a crazy time.
It sounds like we're watching an episode of one of those Discovery Channel shows where Who Did I Marry or My Neighbor Next Door. It's like, this is insanity.
Right. So all of this background kind of informed my writing. I write from true life experiences, and I put a lot of my real life incidents in the books. And I had a pretty wild career too.
Before we get into your career, I got to ask you a question.
Okay.
Do you ever feel like I don't want to tell people this story because they're going to look at me like there's something wrong with me, like this guy's in outer space, like a mental case?
People would ask me that same question. I'd say it felt like everybody was going through the same thing to me. Like all families had their skeletons, and you watch television, you see that stuff on television too. So it just, for some reason, I just thought, this is just like what everybody goes through. Really.
The reason I bring that up, there's parts of my story. And the reason I don't talk about them on my radio show is it's not just my story. It's my daughter's story. It's my ex-wife's story. It's my current wife's story. my mother, my sisters,
Right.
Because they all have the same last name, and I have to be respectful of that. But the other reason is some of them are so bizarre that normal people. This goes back to, and I'm going to ask you this: normal people, like at the cookout, when you start telling them, "Oh yeah, what it's really like," they're like, "You can stop anytime now because I don't want to hear this."
Yeah. I had a story that I was working in Low Desert. I was a supervisor out in Low Desert, and Seminole County is 20,000 square miles. It's the largest county in the contiguous United States. It's huge. And this one station out in Morongo, Joshua Tree, covered 2,200 square miles, just the one station. And all these fringe people from society go out there to live. And the story, I tell the story, nobody believes it, but I kept the call history on it. It was on Halloween, and this guy was a drug addict. He was into muscle relaxers, and we figured he took 30 or 35 that day because his tolerance had built up. And he was walking across his front yard when his body decided to shut down, and he just died. He dropped dead right in his front yard. And these trick-or-treaters were coming and trick-or-treating, and they thought that he was a prop. And so they were stepping over him and going to the house to get the trick-or-treats, the candy. So along about midnight, the wife, she's in there watching, she's a speed freak. She's watching the big screen television, the door open, it's cold. It's a low desert. And she looks out and her husband's DFO, that's what they call it, and he done fell out. So like he's done before, so she goes out and picks him up by the ankle and drags him into the house. And he's banging his head and tearing his shirt, gets him in the house. She feels his face and he's cold. So she gets a thermometer and tries to stick it in his mouth, but he's got rigor mortis and his jaw's locked tight. So she flips him over, pulls his pants down, sticks a thermometer in his butt and pulls it out. Oh, he's cold. Takes all his clothes off, and she's using that dryer to heat him, to warm him up, warm his body up. And as it happened, it was a well-patrolled area because it was a high crime area. And the deputy's driving by real slow, and she looks out the door and she sees him. She runs out, "Deputy, my husband's sick." And the deputy calls medical aid. He comes running in, and there's a naked dead guy on his stomach with a thermometer in his butt, and a lady with a hairdryer trying to warm him up.
Oh,
now,
my goodness.
I tell her that story. That's the weirdest story that I had in my 31 years of my career.
We could talk about extremely bizarre stories. And police, and I say police, that means sheriff's deputies, all former law, have some of the most bizarre stories ever. This is the Law Enforcement Today show. We're turning our conversation with David Putnam and talk about his police career, his law enforcement career, and then go into how all this motivates him to write his award-winning novels. This is the Law Enforcement Today show. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. There was social media, and then there was social audio. Now the Breakout app combines the best of both. Best of all, the Breakout app is free with versions for iPhone and Android devices. You can download the app for free at the App Store and Google Play, or you can download for free at www.letbreak.com.
Are you wondering where you can find more great podcasts? Head to letradioshow.com, click Be Heard, and discover other fantastic podcasts like this one. Also available on our free app, all at letradioshow.com.
Return our conversation with David Putnam on the Law Enforcement Today show. David is a retired law enforcement officer, like 29 years in law enforcement. He's also an award-winning novelist and writer. His books are available. Get more information about him and his website, davidputnambooks.com. David, you've got some bizarre, phenomenal stories. And sadly, they're all true. That's the part that people seem to miss out on. And one of the things they miss out on is the realities of working in law enforcement. For example, how much trauma law enforcement officers are exposed to, how much violence they see, and sometimes how much violence is where they're the victim, they're the target. You went through a situation during your police career where you had to use deadly force, am I correct?
Yes.
And the reason I say that is because so many, and here's a misconception a lot of people have, so many law enforcement officers go their entire career and they say, I never pulled my gun except at a range. I always said this, David, where did they work? Because it wasn't like that in Baltimore. I was in 4 shootings in a little more than 10 years, and fortunately everybody survived the first 2. I never even fired back at, which goes contrary to what the news media says about police or officer-involved shootings. Back then, we didn't call them officer-involved. They're just shootings.
Yeah, that's true. I think I was in total of 16, I think was I counted, where I was either shooting or standing there when shots were being fired and people were going down.
And if you told people that, they'd say right away that you got a propensity towards violence. There's something wrong with you.
That's true, but I was working on a violent crimes team that did 2 tours on SWAT, and we were put into those situations chasing the bad guys.
That's exactly what I would say too. I didn't make this happen. I responded to a call or someone shot at me. And here's the thing: before we get into your officer-involved shooting, we talk about in depth. When people shot at me, I was shocked. My first reaction was, "You don't even know me. Why are you shooting at me?"
Right. Yeah.
I since now realize it's because of what the uniform I wore. That's why.
Right. The first time I was brand new, young, and I started early. They hired me at 20 because I was a cadet. Went through the academy, went through training. When I got off on my own, I went to an armed robbery of a photomat, and that's back when they had those kiosks in the parking lot. So they don't have them anymore. You drive up and put drop your film off, then come pick it up a few days later. Well, 2 people robbed this kiosk, and I'll shorten the story a little bit because it gets a little long. And the look on that woman's face and the fear, I wanted to chase the people that caused that. And so I started chasing violence very early in my career. And as a patrol officer, I did a detective job. I would answer my calls, but on the side, I would be working these armed robberies. I'd pull the reports. I'd have my own pin maps, and I was arresting armed robbers after the fact. And as it happened, when I counted back, when I look back on it, it happened to be the 13th one that I went after. And I was making $600 a month straight time as a patrol officer, and I had to pay rent and my car and insurance. So I would go home for dinner and eat macaroni and cheese and hot dogs, and I didn't care because I was having a great time. I was having the time of my life. And an armed robbery call goes out. And I knew the officer was going. He was going to go slow and get there after the fact because it came out as an in-progress robbery. So I cleared by lunch, and I just turned 21. So they gave me a fast car, a gun, and told me to chase bad guys, and it was just I was in heaven. So I break lunch, and I'm driving up to the call, tell dispatch, and she advises over the radio that the suspects are 2 white males in denim jackets. They're armed with handguns and they're running from the location. It's the Market Basket grocery store that I went to as a kid with my mom for years. We went there, so I knew the area. And the dispatch said that the Box Boys are chasing the 2 suspects. So I asked on the radio, I said, are the Box Boys armed? And she says no. And that's when she catches on that this is a damn normal situation. Market Basket is on mountain, and there's side streets in the back are perpendicular to Market Basket. So I just picked one because I knew the area. I had to choose a choice of 5 streets. I picked one, drove down this street, and a car was blocking the street. And a guy was standing outside the car, pointing toward the house. So I stopped. I advised dispatch I was in foot pursuit of an armed suspect, even though I hadn't seen him yet. I knew I was going to be engaging this guy.
Yeah, you can just tell.
So, yeah, because I'm right on him. I mean, this guy had just tried to carjack this guy because he's running from the Market Basket. So, as it turns out, the sergeant who was responding was setting a perimeter, and he had stepped on my radio transmission, so nobody knew where I was. Nobody heard the call go out, my call go out. So I ran up to the house, and there's a man that comes out the front door, very elderly, and he says, he's in my backyard. So I said, can I go through your house? And he turns around too slow, but I think I was just probably too pumped up and too young, so I couldn't follow him. I went to the side, I just vaulted his fence, and his dog attacks me. Comes at me, and I shoot the dog off. He calls the dog, and I run to the fence, and I could hear the guy yard jumping. He's going over fences This is at dusk. It's low light, just after sunset, and it's got that sparkly, that grayness in the air kind of thing. And so I keep jumping yards until I don't hear him anymore. And I do a quick peek, look over, move down, do a quick peek, and I go over the fence. And I'm looking in the backyard and all the shrubs, thinking that he's laying in wait. And I look up, and through the sliding glass door, he'd gone in the house. And this white guy with a Levi jacket has a kid in a headlock, holding his feet up off the ground, and has a gun to his head. And he yells, "Quit chasing me! I'm going to kill you!" So I line up on him. I don't know what to do because this is my first violent encounter. I give a talk on anatomy of violence and what it takes to shoot somebody. And after analyzing it, I had the legal right, the moral right, but at that point, I didn't have the emotional ability to pull that trigger.
Right.
I aimed at him, and my thoughts were, is it this old sheer glass or is it the safety glass? Because if it's the old sheer glass, it's going to deflect my round. And I was confident. I was number 2 in the academy with a handgun. I could hit the guy from where I was. It was about a 25-foot shot, but I didn't know about the glass. So I said, "You shoot the kid, I'm going to shoot you." He sees me lining up on him with my sights, so he pushes the kid down. He runs out the front door. I go to the side and jump the fence, and as I'm jumping the fence, I hear, there he is, get him. And that was the street the box boys were on. And as I come over the fence into the yard, the box boys go, there's the police, get him, that's the guy. And so they're off about half a block down to my right, and a crook is off to my left running through the front yards of this block. And so I start chasing him. I could clearly see he had a chrome 38 in his hand, and still I had the legal right, the moral right, but I still did not have the emotional ability to pull the trigger. And he was yelling the whole time, "I'm going to kill you. Keep chasing me. I'm going to kill you." And I continue to chase him. He cuts up between some houses, and he's going to go over another fence, and I know he's going to lay in wait for me. So I stop at the sidewalk, and I yell, "Stop, or I'm going to shoot." And this is a long shot, and it's a technical shot because it's low light, he's moving, and it's a long distance. And he keeps going. He gets up on the fence. He's about to go over. And I yell, "Last chance," because I didn't want to shoot. And I actually pulled the hammer back because in my mind, my training had told me that I had to go single action or I wasn't going to hit him. It wasn't even like a conscious thought. And just before he went over, I tugged the hammer and it popped. And he goes up in the air, flips around, and lands on his back. And he's teetering on his back on this fence. And he's yelling, "Oh, my God, you shot me, you shot me."
We're going to take a short break. We're talking with David Putnam, and I really want to return this conversation. This is Law Enforcement Today Show. So much more to talk about. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
John discovered a cool new app, and he just can't put it down because it has millions of great podcasts, including Law Enforcement Today. So now you can listen anytime, anywhere, and also chat with John. It's called Podopolo. It's free on either app store, so join John there. Follow Law Enforcement Today and DM John when you do. That's Podopolo. Download it now.
The place to be online is our Facebook page. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. You'll get access to unique news articles, editorials, and so much more. That's Law Enforcement Today Radio Show on Facebook. Return a conversation with David Putnam, retired law enforcement officer, also author of multiple award-winning books. Get more details at his website, davidputnambooks.com. David, before we went to break, we're talking about this incident where you're chasing the guy, and I got to tell you, I'm like, adrenaline's going, and I'm visualizing the stuff I went through. And you're telling in detail, specific detail, your thought process, all these things. And I just want people to understand something. From my experience, and I'm sure it's the same with you, these things happen in a flash, and we have more time to think about it afterwards. But what's going on, it's quick reaction. You resort to your training, all those things. So you talked about, you fired a shot, and the guy was kind of like bouncing on top of the fence. I'm like, was he hit?
Yeah, so I start moving up on him. I'm about halfway to him, and I'm yelling at him, drop the gun, because I can still see the gun in his hand. I start thinking that he's trying to draw me in because there's no way I hit him. Like I said, it was a long shot, long distance. It was low light and moving, and there was just no way that I hit the guy. So I'm yelling, drop the gun, and I stop halfway because I think he's trying to lure me in for a closer shot. And he realizes I stake aim at him again. I'm going to shoot him, and he realizes I'm going to shoot him, and he throws the gun down, and he flips over. When he does, he loses his balance. He flips over out of my side on the other side of the fence. And when I fired the shot, the bus, it all of a sudden turned too real for the box boys, and they turned around. They were running the other direction. So I'm all by myself. I go up to this cedar plank fence gate, and I look over, do a quick peek, and he had fallen on his stomach. And the money from the market basket was in a paper bag and had fluffed out and was all over the patio. And underneath him was this widening puddle of blood. So I climb up on the cedar plank fence. I look down on him, and I can't see his hands. So I say, show me your hands, and he won't show me, and I'm all pumped up with adrenaline, so I drop on him. I knee drop him. I break his leg and his hip when I landed on him, and I start handcuffing him. He's going, no, don't handcuff me. I'm shot. So I get him cuffed and search him. I can't find the gun. The guns happened to fall on the adjoining yard on the other side of the fence. We find it later. But I call on the radio and ask for help, and they don't know where I am. I don't know where I am. I go to the sliding glass door of that house, and I see a woman. She's wearing a night robe. I guess she got ready for bed early, and she ran to her bedroom, closed the door, and she didn't call the police. And this helped me later on in my career because I had a similar situation where I just commandeered the house. I was smart enough to go in and commandeer the house and barricade and use the phone. So in this incident, they put a cop at each end of the street, and they walked him down yelling my name, and that's how they found me. The guy that found me was a guy named Art Bills. He was 6'3", 250 pounds, and he was a black belt in karate, one of the baddest dudes I ever met. And he looked over the fence, he saw me, and he was so pumped up that he just pushed the whole cedar gate, everything down, and walked over and shook my hand, said, "Good job, you did a good job," which really, really helped me a lot. I was hyperventilating sitting on that picnic bench.
I got to tell you, the last shooting I was involved in, first and the last were totally different, but I was, the third one actually, I was vomiting afterwards, and that I was a experienced officer. So the emotions that come with that. Earlier, you said something a couple times, having the moral right, the legal right, everything's right, but not having the emotional ability to do that. And a lot of people, after you're forced to use deadly force, the results, the emotional impact can be devastating. How were you after?
Well, there's a little bit more to the story. It turns out that these guys were serial robbers, and they had robbed the farmer's market and a pharmacy that day, and they had shot the pharmacist. And I'd hit him as he was going over, and it went through just under his tailbone, and it just went right through him. His prostate, his colon, his upper and lower intestine, and lodged in his chest, and the paramedics got there and saved him. He had 4 balloons of heroin in a keister stash up in his rectum, and the doctor said if I had been an inch lower, he would have overdosed on heroin, which would have been, poetic justice. But the pharmacist that he had shot that day was a nurse at the hospital that he took him to. So there was a little bit of irony in that. And I lost my train of thought.
What we're getting at is, all things being righteous, a justified shoot, all those things, quite often it doesn't take away the experience for, especially a young officer. And you said you're hyperventilating. And I'm just curious, did it take you a while to process that? Because back in the day, we didn't have all we have nowadays. We didn't have crisis intervention teams and peer support. We had the suck it up buttercup police, your police attitude, on the next call.
Yeah, and back then they said they gave you like 2 weeks off to recalibrate. But back then it had just the thinking had just shifted, and they said it was better to get them right back on the horse. So they gave me the time off, and then one captain decided, no, that wasn't right. So the next day, I was off. I was supposed to be at work, but I took it off, and they called me and said, no, you're coming back to work. So I came back into work the very next day, yeah. Got back in the car and started driving around.
As if nothing happened.
Yeah. As if nothing happened, yeah.
That's right. I'm going to handle calls like nothing happened. Look, you and I can joke and laugh about that, but here's the reality. And before we get into your novels and your life after, is, I tell people I cried quite often in a patrol car. You never saw me cry in public. That was, except maybe police funerals. However, you go from a life and death, really traumatic incident to a parking complaint or a neighborhood dispute or some other routine call and act as if nothing had happened. And I can just see you going from a life and death situation like this to handling routine calls the next day as if nothing happened.
Yeah, you go to a domestic dispute and people are arguing, and it's so insignificant in comparison to what just happened. You know what I mean? It's like, why are you people even arguing about something so petty when the real world is out there? You know what I mean?
Oh, well, the he said, she said, I have no tolerance for. Police work ruined me for that. And I tell my wife all the time, we'll turn on the television. It'll be these shows where they have so-called pundits arguing about stuff. I'm like, I can't listen to that. It reminds me of domestic disputes. I can't do it, David. So you retired from police work and began a career as an author. Before we get into specifics, did your police career, was that a motivator for you writing your books?
Well, I was an avid reader before I was involved in law enforcement, and I read everything. I mean, from a very young age. So I think Adam 12 and Joseph Wambach kind of pushed me into law enforcement. So when I was a cop, I was on looking at narcotics. I was on a surveillance of a meth lab out in the Lucerne Valley, which is Mojave Desert, nothing out there. And it's not like in the movies where all the cops are watching the same house. When you're on a surveillance, one guy has the eye and everybody else is laid off.
Right.
So now they gave me a fast car, a gun, and a badge to chase bad guys, and I got to read books, which was the number one thing I loved to do. So I was down to my last book in the backseat of my car that I stored in the backseat of my car. The first one was an international bestseller, so I bought the second one. But what happens so often is an author will write for 10 years on one book, finally get it published, then he has 1 year to write the next book. So I was a captive audience. I'd read this whole book, and it was just a dog of a book. And when I got done, I thought I could do better than this. So this is 1989, and I wrote my first 4 novels on the front seat of my cop car during surveillances.
That's amazing.
And each book was 4 legal pads long. And so that started my career. I started writing when I was still a copper, and I would get up at 4:00 in the morning. I'd write for 3 hours and go to work, and I would do that every day.
And how many books do you have to your credit now?
Well, I was on my 38th manuscript. I wrote 38 books before I sold my first one. And so I'm on book, that was in 2014 when I sold my first book, which was called The Disposables. And it's a continuing series with a character named Bruno Johnson. He's an African-American detective. Well, he's an ex-cop, ex-con who rescues children from toxic homes. He couldn't do it when he was a cop, so now he goes outside the law to rescue these children. And he has a makeshift orphanage down in Costa Rica where he takes the children. And number 9 came out in February, and it got a starred review in Publishers Weekly, which is the industry standard for publishing. And I was really proud that it's the first time that I got a starred review, and that's a killer book.
We are almost out of time. Where can people find out information about you and all your books? Because you got lots of them.
Yeah. David at davidputnambooks.com is my website. And I just had a new one come out. It's called The Fierce of Moonlight Black. And it's a second series. And the first part is all memoir. It's true stories of everything that happened in my career in the first year. David, thanks so much for being guests in the Law Enforcement Today show. Very much appreciated. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank our guests so much for coming on the Law Enforcement Today radio show. The Law Enforcement Today radio show is a nationally syndicated radio show broadcast on numerous stations once a week and growing. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, please do me a big favor. Tell a friend. I'll be back in just a couple days with a brand new episode of the Law Enforcement Today radio show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.